Imagine walking into a supermarket. You see chicken, beef, fish, maybe even lamb, but then you walk past the meat section and see something strange. Horse meat. For most people, that would feel wrong. Not unusual, not exotic, just wrong. And that is strange. Because thousands of years ago, humans did not necessarily look at a horse and see a companion, a race animal, or something to ride. They could look at one and see dinner. So how did one of humanity's oldest sources of meat become an animal that many people would never consider eating? And more importantly, why did we stop? The story begins long before horses carried soldiers, pulled carts, or raced across tracks. It begins when humans were still hunting wild horses. During the prehistoric period, wild horses lived across enormous parts of Eurasia. They were fast, powerful, and extremely difficult to catch. But they were also enormous packages of food. One successful hunt could provide a group with a huge amount of meat, fat, marrow, and other useful materials. Archaeological sites across Eurasia contain horse remains showing that humans hunted and butchered them. At Botai, in what is now northern Kazakhstan, archaeologists found hundreds of thousands of animal bone fragments. More than 90% were from horses. Many of the horse bones show cut marks and chopping damage consistent with butchery. The evidence suggests horses were a major part of the community's diet. So for these people, a horse was not automatically something you protected from the dinner table. It was food. But then something changed. Humans began developing a completely different relationship with horses. Instead of only hunting them, we started controlling them. And eventually, horses became useful for something far more valuable than meat: movement. A horse could carry a human, pull a load, travel long distances, and eventually transform warfare. That changed the economics of the animal. Think about it. If you have a cow, you can eat it. But if you have a horse that can carry you hundreds of kilometers, pull your equipment, and help you move faster than you could on foot, killing it for dinner suddenly becomes a much bigger decision. The horse had become more than food, it had become a tool. And then it became something even more powerful. A status symbol, a weapon, a companion, and eventually, in many societies, almost a member of the family. This is where our modern reaction starts to make more sense. We don't usually think of food only in terms of nutrition. We also learn what is considered food. A chicken is food. A cow is food. A horse? For many people, the mental category is completely different. But here's the strange part. There is nothing universal about that reaction. Horse meat is still eaten in parts of Europe and Asia. In some cultures, it has remained a normal food. In others, it became deeply unpopular. So there was never one moment when humanity collectively decided, we don't eat horses anymore. Instead, different societies developed different ideas about the animal. And in parts of Europe, horse meat gradually became associated with practices considered pagan or barbaric. Christianization also played a role in changing attitudes toward horse consumption, although recent archaeological research suggests the story was not as simple as Christianity banned horse meat. Medieval evidence from Hungary, for example, shows that people continued eating horses even after conversion to Christianity. So religion may have influenced the decline, but it wasn't the entire explanation. There was another factor. Horses became incredibly valuable alive. Imagine you own a horse. It can transport you, it can pull your belongings, it can help you travel, it can potentially help you in war, and it can reproduce. Killing that animal gives you food for a limited amount of time. Keeping it alive can provide useful work for years. That makes the horse very different from an animal primarily raised for meat. And there is another problem. Horses are not particularly efficient meat production animals compared with specialized livestock. They require substantial amounts of food, and historically, a horse could consume resources that might instead support other animals or humans. So humans slowly created a strange divide. Some animals became food animals, others became working animals, and horses moved firmly into the second category. But then history gave us a fascinating reminder that these categories are not permanent. During periods of famine, war, and food shortages, people have eaten horses again. One of the most famous examples came during the Siege of Paris in 1870 and 1871. With food becoming scarce, horses were slaughtered and eaten. Even animals that would normally have been considered far too valuable were no longer protected by their usual social status. And that tells us something important. The question isn't really, is horse meat edible? Of course it is. Humans have been eating it for thousands of years. The real question is, why does one culture call an animal dinner while another calls it a companion? Because our food choices are not determined by biology alone. They are determined by history, geography, economics, tradition, and what the people around us taught us was normal. To a prehistoric hunter, a wild horse could represent an enormous opportunity. To a steppe community, horses could provide meat and milk. To a medieval warrior, a horse could mean mobility and power. To a modern racehorse owner, the same animal might be worth more alive than almost any amount of meat could justify. The animal didn't change, our relationship with it did. And that may be the strangest thing about food. Humans have eaten thousands of different animals throughout history. Some disappeared from our diets because they became too valuable alive. Some disappeared because of religion or tradition. Some because better livestock became available. And some simply because society decided that's not food. So the next time you look at a horse, remember, you're not looking at an animal that humans simply decided was never meant to be eaten. You're looking at an animal that humans once hunted for food, then learned to ride, then used to travel, then used in war, and eventually taught generations of people to see it as something completely different. The horse didn't leave the human menu because humans suddenly discovered it wasn't edible. It left because, over thousands of years, we changed what a horse meant to us. From prey, to transportation, to power, to companion. And maybe that's the strangest part of food. What we eat isn't always about what we can eat. Sometimes it's about what our ancestors taught us to see as food. If you enjoyed discovering the strange history behind everyday things, subscribe to Monkey to Modern, because there's a lot more about the human world that seems normal, until you ask why. See you in the next one.